Evening. My name is Richard Niebuhr. I'm the acting chair of the Appropriations Committee for Northborough. It's just past the hour of 6 o'clock. Our meeting is an hour early tonight due to the presentation from the various schools. And before we get into our meeting, I have a statement that must be read. The opening of the Appropriations Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020. Due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth and due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the Appropriations Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely, along with all staff and representatives of the Northborough K-8 schools and the Algonquin Regional High School, who will be speaking to their portion of tonight's agenda. The order allows the Appropriations Committee to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to the Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Okay, and at this point, I have to confirm our board members that are present. Will you please answer aye when I call your name? We have George Brinkle.
Aye.
And Bob D'Amico is absent and excused for this meeting. Janet Height.
Aye, here, yes, aye.
Anthony Petit.
Aye.
And myself, Richard Niebuhr. Also along, we have our town administrator, John Kadir.
Present.
And presenting tonight, we have our superintendent, Greg Martineau.
Present.
And we have our director of finance, Becky Pellegrino.
Present.
And finance director, Jason Little.
Present.
Also in attendance with us, we will have the, from the Northborough K-8 School Committee, we have Joan Frank,
Present.
Kelly Gurnett,
Present.
Erin Tagliaferri. Is Erin here?
She is absent.
All right. And from the Regional School Committee members, we have Christopher Covino
Present.
and Joan Frank.
Present.
Have I missed anyone? Please say aye.
I, Lauren Bailey Jones, K-8 School
Oh,
Committee.
I'm sorry, I wrote that down and totally missed you. We have Lauren Bailey Jones from the Northborough K-8 Committee. I guess
Thank
she's a stand-in for Erin. Now, having done that, I guess we will go to our first agenda item, and that is the approval of the minutes from February 18th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Okay, Janice Height has approved the minutes. Made a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
George Brankel is approved, seconded. We'll take a roll call. All in favor, please say aye. George Brinkle,
Aye.
Bob, Janice Height,
Aye,
Anthony Petit,
Aye.
and myself, Richard Niebuhr, aye. So everyone is in favor, and the minutes have passed unanimously. For our second item on the agenda, we have the K-8 schools and the Algonquin Regional High School budget presentation. I will turn this over to John Kadir at this time to make further announcements and introduce our guests.
Thank you, Rick. So annually, we meet with both the superintendent as well as members of the school committee. Traditionally, this has been a all day or a most of an all day on a Saturday. This year, we are moving to have it in the evening I think what we found is over the years, the cooperation, the coordination between the superintendent's office, administration, the school committee, my office, and the financial boards committees has just improved to the point where things don't take quite as long as they used to because we tend not to argue like we used to. So it's amazing how smoothly things go when people actually work together, which is our culture and our tradition for many years now in Northborough. So this evening we have the superintendent, Greg Martineau, and the director of finance, Becky Pellegrino. My understanding is the committee has all received the budget presentation materials in advance. They received those last week. So hopefully they've all had a chance to go through them. And then tonight, Greg's going to go through, I believe we're going to start with K-8 first.
Correct.
And then make our way to the high school. So with that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, John. So first of all, I was looking back at the calendar of FY 20, and I found that the last year we met on March 7th, 2020. And I'll just comment on what a difference a year can make in terms of what's happening in the world. So this is probably the only presentation that we're ahead of schedule from last year. It seems like everything is a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult in this COVID-19 environment. I just want to begin by, thanking you for the opportunity to present the Northborough Pre-K to 8 FY22 budget. As John indicated, we did provide you with the budget materials and backup documentation. And my intention this evening is to go through the budget presentation, focus on a few highlights, and then open it up for any questions that the committee might have. And just before I begin, I just wanted to also thank Town Administrator John Kader for the continued partnership. I think in a pandemic, a strong relationship and strong partnership is more important than ever. In a normal year, we have outstanding relationships. We talk daily, often, and I just applaud his leadership. We meet weekly in the COVID-19 task force, and I feel like we've been supported as a school committee from the town and Town Administrator Kader. So thank you for that. So I am going to share my screen. All right. So again, so what I am presenting to you this evening is the school committee voted budget for FY22. And I'll share a little bit about where we are, some of the highlights of the budget, and some of the growth areas that this budget brings forth. So as we begin each year with the budget presentation, we are a mission and vision oriented organization. We are about students and helping students grow and learn and prepare them for college and career. Our mission is quite simple. It's educate, inspire, and challenge. And we did reauthorize our strategic plan last year, and we did develop an updated vision. And our vision is also quite simple. It's really to create students who are collaborators, create critical and creative thinkers, communicators, socially and civically engaged, growth-oriented, and healthy and balanced. So as you all are well aware, the budget is a process. So as we close out one fiscal year, we already start the process of planning for the upcoming budget year. And it is a collaborative effort, working closely again with the town, as well as the directors at the district level and principals. So we begin in September, and as you know, the budget process moves through the months and with each milestone being achieved. So in September, I'll just highlight a few items in each month. So the operational budget subcommittee meets, and we talk about the overall goals of the budget. We also talk about the town's economic landscape, and any information John has provided me, I provide to the operational budget subcommittee. In October, the school committee sets goals or approves their goals, and I'll speak to those in a minute. In November, We have conversations around the capital plan for FY22. And again, this is a partnership with Town Administrator Kader and thinking about what we're trying to accomplish in terms of the capital projects. And then we present, we start planning and creating the first preliminary budget to present in November. In January and March, we're fine tuning the budgets and hopefully getting to a point where we're presenting a budget to the school committee, which it can approve and vote to move forward to the annual town meeting. And again, the final stage in the process, as you all are aware of, is the town meeting, which I believe still is on for April 26th, 2021. So I just thought I'd begin by talking about where we left off in fiscal year 21. I think it's important context in terms of where we began in terms of the budget conversations for FY22. So this table represents kind of the budget process that we used last year to create the FY21 budget. In the two rows that I'd like to highlight, the last two rows that are highlighted in green. Pre-pandemic, we had the school committee had voted a budget that was a 3.15% increase. And that was the budget we had hoped to bring to the voters for approval. But again, because of the pandemic, working in collaboration with the town, we did go back and actually reduce the budget as a result of the pandemic. So the budget that we brought forth and that was voted at town meeting reflected a 1% increase. And just point out that we weren't the only department in the town of Northborough that did this exercise and had to reduce budgets as a result of the pandemic. Some of the, sorry. So the other important part of the budget process is really thinking about the approved budget goals. So the school committee each year sets goals, and these goals are essential for us as a leadership team in the school department to think about what we want to accomplish. With the reauthorization of the district's strategic plan, the school committee actually spent a significant amount of time revising its goals to align with the plan and making sure that they were current. So really the fiscal year 22 approved budget goals really were around recruiting, maintaining, and supporting high quality staff, meeting the needs of all learners with instructional classroom models that are research-based, reflective of best practices, and support class student-teacher ratios in accordance with the committee's class size policy. Also to expand professional development for all teachers with an emphasis on providing support for programs and professional development, maintaining the district's capital assets, maintaining and supporting instructional technology, and then ensuring all students are provided with equity of opportunity. So those were the goals that we kept in mind and at the forefront as we built our FY22 budget. So as we began the FY22 budget process, the unknowns, we had a couple of unknowns, which are typical in every budget cycle. Contractual obligations, custodians. We did last year negotiate a one-year contract with the custodians and are in the process of negotiating a contract. So that was an unknown as we entered into the budget process. Chapter 70 funding and new legislation. So thinking about what the governor's budget would fund in terms of the Student Opportunity Act and what Chapter 70 would look like in this COVID-19 pandemic environment. So we do have those numbers. So the numbers that are reflected in this budget are the governor's House 1 numbers, which John has provided us. Out of district special education funding, so circuit breaker, again, the level of funding at the state level varies from year to year. And lastly, thinking about COVID-19 2022 expenses, again, thinking that there will be some expenses as a result of the continued pandemic, whether it's our PPE for our students, faculty, and staff, cleaning materials, and so forth. So in terms of the FY22 budget process, so it always begins with looking at what are the initial requests from our building principals and our directors. And we always engage in an exercise to think about what if there were no fiscal constraints, what would we want to ask for in the FY22 budget? So the first initial round of requests reflected an 8.92% budget increase. I did check with John Kader, and that was not in alignment with the overall town's plan. But again, we think it's an important exercise to think outside of the parameters of fixed resources, so that we're really thinking about what is the future, what are things we're not thinking about. The leadership team went back to the table and sharpened the pencil, and as a result, we were able to reduce the budget to a 4.40% increase. And then again, spending a lot of time as a leadership team, getting better data from John and the state, we were able to bring the budget to a 3.32%. And then last month, the school committee voted the budget, which was $25,799,678, which represented a 2.47% increase. So in terms of the budget increases, what are the budget drivers in this budget? So as we have shared with the Appropriations Committee for several years, one of the goals of the committee has been to achieve tuition-free kindergarten. We had a 5-year plan, with this year being our 3rd year of the plan. However, as a result of the pandemic, we were not able to charge tuition to our kindergarten families. And then as a result, it accelerated the conversation at the committee level. And this was a major priority for the school committee to accomplish this goal. So this budget reflects $200,000, which brings us to the point where we will be offering tuition-free kindergarten to all of our Northborough families. The other increase was custodial supplies and building maintenance. This was as a result of deferring maintenance and purchasing of supplies as a result of the pandemic and getting to a 1% budget in FY21. So this FY22 budget restores that to $87,300. And then lastly, again, we deferred the purchase of technology. So there is an increase of instructional technology, which reflects some of those deferred purchases in FY21 and some additional purchases in FY22. So the total, as you can see, is a little over $330,000. So in terms of budget offsets, so what were the budget offsets that we could apply in fiscal year 2022? So first was circuit breaker reimbursement offset. So again, circuit breaker is the mechanism for reimbursing communities for the tuition of students who attend out-of-district placements for special education services. So we applied a little over $1.3 million in circuit breaker reimbursement to this FY22 budget. We saw some retirements and leave of absences. So again, an offset is approximately $106,000. We also, as a result of the pandemic, were able to apply some ESSER and IDA grant funds to offset this budget, which totaled a little bit over $125,000. And then again, each year, the principals review line items very closely. And as a result of principals and directors doing that work, we were able to identify $65,608 of line item reductions. So the total of budget offsets is a little over $1.6 million. So again, the budget that I'm sharing with you tonight really reflects a level services budget with some growth in a few targeted areas. The total budget again is $25,799,678, which reflects a $621,834 increase, or a 2.47% increase over FY21. So just in terms of a comparison, again, I know each department could do this comparison, but from the school committee voted budget in FY 2021 pre-pandemic, if we were to compare the budget that we're presenting tonight to the school committee voted budget, this budget would reflect a 0.33% increase, again, from the January 2020 voted budget. And again, I think each town department could do this exact exercise, but I think it's important to have a benchmark to what we had hoped for and where we are today. So in terms of growth areas of this budget, a significant growth area is implementing tuition-free full-day kindergarten for our Northborough residents. This has been, again, a 5-year goal, and we're able to achieve it a year early in very difficult budgetary circumstances. It also purchases some instructional resources and adds additional PD. Those instructional resources are focused on history and social sciences. Specifically, the state came out with some new learning standards, pre-K through 8, and these funds and these resources allow us to be aligned with what students are expected to know and be able to do. We're also seeing an increase in the diversity of our families. So we have an increase in translation services, again, making sure our families have access to information in a way that they can receive and comprehend information. So a lot of work around translation and interpretation. And we've seen this line item increase each year. Also, really looking at how we can become more efficient. So currently the way we track absences and hire substitutes is through people power. So we are looking to automate some of that work to free up some people resources to focus on other projects and allow some of the software to do some of that, some of the organizational work behind it. And lastly, this budget reflects some increased instructional capacity to support teaching and learning. And this is a partnership with our Southborough pre-K through 8 community. It includes a 0.5 director of English language arts and a 0.5 director of mathematics, and also a 0.3 director of social and emotional learning. And those roles and those positions are really to provide professional development to our educators, but also really focus on instruction, developing curriculum and building coherence across our grade levels and vertically aligned across our schools as well. So conversations that we will continue to have, even though this is a school committee voted budget, really looking at student level supports for academic interventions. And much of the work that we can move forward doesn't always cost or reflect additional funding needed. And then also looking at the recommendations of the music pre-K through 12 study group. One of the recommendations was implementing a strings program at the elementary level in Northborough. So the school committee did have a number of conversations around, what would that look like? What would it cost? And we're really thinking that this is something that we will hopefully bring forth in the fiscal year 23 budget as a growth area. So just looking at budget increases over a period of time. So again, over the past 4 years, we've had collaborative partnerships with the town of Northborough and town administrator John Kader. We've been able to accomplish a lot while really making sure that, knowing that we're one department of many in the town of Northborough, and that we're also we are the largest financial impact to the overall town of Northborough budget. So I'm making sure there's a partnership and we understand what the town's goals are, and making sure that we're in alignment with the overall town's future plans. And the last slide really is, so this is the 5-year plan to transition to free full-day kindergarten. So this was the FY21 highlighted row was what we had hoped to achieve in FY21 in terms of collecting tuition revenue. But as you can see in green, we're not able to collect any kindergarten tuition. And as a result, this really accelerated the conversation of the school committee and really making this the greatest priority in this, the budget I am presenting to you this evening. So at this point in time, I will stop talking and really provide an opportunity before I continue to answer any questions or provide any clarity to what I just shared.
Through the chair, if I may. You're on mute, Rick.
Do I have any questions or comments from the committee? If you would just, I can't have to scroll through here. Would you just raise your hand and give me a second to look through? Yes, Tony.
Oh, thanks. I wanted to know some things about enrollment. What are the enrollment trend in K-8 lately, or maybe those figures are in here and I just haven't seen them yet. And was there a drop of people leaving the school based on the because of the restrictions of the plague here?
Yes, so I think I'll share my screen again and go to the enrollment figures, but we did see from what we projected pre-pandemic, we did see a decline in enrollment across our pre-K through 8 our students. We saw approximately around 80 students less than we had projected. And we've had many conversations with families around, many families have made decisions to either hold their kids, not enroll their kids in kindergarten. There are families who made decisions to homeschool, and there are some families who made decisions to send their children to either parochial or private schools as a result of, the systems that were open beyond what we were offering as a district. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Let me just get to the slide here. So, in terms of NESDEC projections for Northborough, as you can see, in FY22 is 1548, and we're really plateauing in terms of overall enrollment increases over the next, 7 to 8 years. If you look at historically enrollment trends, we were at a peak in 2011. And as you can see, it's been declining gradually up until 2020. And again, over the next, 7 or 8 years, it's really plateauing. And the trend is going to be, fairly flat based on NASDAQ's enrollment projections. And this has been true to what NASDAQ has projected to our actuals that we've experienced over the past several years as well.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments? I'd like to just ask one thing out of curiosity. With this, all the people at home now, because the schools were closed or they were being taught at home, do we have any families that didn't have internet connection or did not have computers? And how was that handled?
Sure, it's a great question. So let me just stop sharing my screen, hang on. So, obviously when we closed on March 13th of 2020, we were not a one-to-one district. So we did do a lot of work making sure that every student in our district pre-K through 8 had a laptop. Our instructional technology department did an amazing job. We also worked very closely with families who did not have access to the internet, and we provided families with internet hotspots. So we had a number of hotspots that we deployed to families. So again, that wasn't a barrier for students to access online learning in our district. So I think it was challenging, but I think our district handled it well, and all students have access and all students have access to a district issued laptop.
And this really didn't bite into your budget to any great extent?
No, we were fairly close to a one-to-one pre-pandemic. What it required us to do is to shift resources and move to the one-to-one. So we had, for example, we had carts of laptops. Basically we dismantled some of those carts of laptops and issued laptops to individual students. We did have some additional purchases that were funded through some of the federal stimulus grants. But it was not anything that impacted our FY21 appropriated budget in a significant manner.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, John.
Greg, I'm just wondering if you can kind of speak. You mentioned the federal stimulus funds. Can you just speak for a moment on the amount of funding that the district received directly and roughly how it was used? And then thirdly, are you concerned, or should we be concerned, that there's any kind of a structural deficit sort of forming reliance on those funds moving into the next fiscal year?
Sure, and I can have Becky Pellegrino speak specifically around the funds that we received as a result of the pandemic and the stimulus. We obviously, as most cities and towns, were very concerned entering this budget season with a lot of unknowns, and having reduced our budget to 1%. We began the year extremely fiscally conservative, holding off any emergency purchase, any unnecessary purchases, only focusing on what we needed in terms of emergencies. We did learn of several funding mechanisms at the state and federal level that allowed us to mitigate some of those budget shortfalls. And we continue to see additional stimulus funds. And the good news is some of those stimulus funds allow us to expend the funds over the next many months into fiscal year 23. And the approach we're taking is to use those funds to basically offset any potential budget shortfalls as we look ahead to fiscal year 23. So Becky can give an overview of the funds we've received and how we've expended those and what we're anticipating for future funding.
What I can do is I'll share my screen. I have the grant funds that we have received. So you can see that we have to date received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different grant funds. The first one is the largest, and that would be the CVRF, the School Reopening Grant. That came to $346,050. And as Greg mentioned, much of what we had identified to use for this grant were one-time purchases. They were not things that we would have needed to support in future budgets. The major things were the professional development for our staff as they acclimate to this new way of teaching. It was for substitutes for both teachers and also for nurses to help out with the new and expanded roles that they have now in the schools. And then it was also purchasing technology. I'll skip down to the Remote Learning Technology Essentials Grant. You can see that that was a small amount of money. That was $3,737. And the majority of that was spent on the hotspots that Greg had mentioned for those families that did require the internet access. And most recently, we have been awarded this state coronavirus prevention fund. That was based on our foundation enrollment, and that was $25 per student, and then an additional $75 for low-income students who are enrolled in our district. And that is $55,225. And those funds are being used to purchase additional HEPA air filtration systems and also chairs and desks as we bring our K-5 students back in 4 days a week. The other two funds were two ESSER funds, and we're hearing now about an ESSER 3 as well. Those funds are based off of our Title I allocations. And so the numbers for our district are small compared to some others because we do not have a large population when it comes to Title I funding. So the first round was $41,057. The second round was $165,518, and 10,000 of that amount does need to be specifically allocated for mental health services or programs for our students. So in total, we have received $611,587. With the ESSER grants, we do have flexibility in terms of when we can utilize those funds. So the ESSER, the first round of ESSER can be used through the end of FY22, and the ESSER 2 can be used through the end of FY23.
So based on the existing or current use and the planned use, we're not anticipating a significant drop off as we move into fiscal 2023 of all of a sudden we're gonna be shy of $600,000 gap here based on the way it's playing out.
Yeah, the FY22 budget does not rely on any stimulus funds to bring the budget forward. The ESSER 2 funds we will not apply for until later because we anticipate that we'll need to access that funding to think about budget FY23.
I'm sure you're all following along as I am the plan that the Biden administration is putting forward, the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. The beauty included in that one is direct funds for municipal use that doesn't go through the state. I believe the local governments in Mass, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, I think it's like 3.7 billion coming in, being divided up. I know there's a lot of questions about some of it going is designed for a county government, which we don't have. So there's all sorts of unknowns, but there could be a significant amount of additional stimulus funds coming through sometime this calendar year. Then the question then is, does it come after our budgets are set? And if it does, how do we access it without an appropriation? But it looks like right now, those funds are in some form they're going to come through, and in some amount they will be designated for local use, unlike the previous CARES Act funding. So Northborough received $1.3 million, but it's very limited in what we can use it on. You can't use it for general revenue replacement. My understanding is these funds in this next round potentially would be general revenue replacement funds. So mean, it's good news. I guess the only concern there, if you, those of us who've been around for a while, the last time the federal government passed stimulus funds to help us out back in 2010, the state took those funds, passed them along to us, and then cut our state aid. So, you know, it doesn't appear right now, it looks like these funds are supposed to come directly to us and not even pass through the state. So the mechanism and how that would look, obviously A&F would be heavily involved in the regulation of how you account for those funding and the use of the funds. But I mean, it's encouraging to think that that might come through. The last, again, through the chair, if I may, the last question I had with regard to the federal funds. So we had met early on, Greg, and talked about the testing protocols and the needs in the schools. And we had accessed the CARES Act funding that the town received. And we earmarked, I believe, $100,000 of that towards testing. I'm just curious if there's any sense of where we are with that expense, and whether or not might be a little early given the vaccine, but do we anticipate the testing continuing in through the fall to start a fiscal 2022?
Yeah, so I think, John, it's another example of the partnership. You know, one of our goals of reopening was to make sure that we had a way to screen and test our faculty and staff and students for the prevalence of the COVID-19 virus within our school system. We've been working all fall and winter to get this up and running. You know, working in collaboration with John. You know, John has provided us with some of the access to the CARES funding, and we've been able to stand up COVID-19 screening for all students pre-K through 8 and all faculty and staff. And it's been a great data point on a weekly basis to see what's happening in terms of prevalence of the virus within our organization. It's also allowing us to think about reopening and increasing in-person learning for our students. So it's had a great impact. What Dr. Walensky from the CDC and Dr. Fauci are indicating is that students will not be vaccinated until the pre-K through 8 students probably won't be vaccinated until sometime early winter, early F22. Which means we would still want to continue with COVID-19 screening for our students as we begin the academic year in the fall. We're hoping that all of our faculty and staff will have been vaccinated by the time we reopen in the fall, but we are not predicting that our students will be. So again, we'll stand up screening again for the fall, and hopefully we can have that end as soon as students are vaccinated.
Tony.
Oh, yes. I wondered, I wanted to ask about personnel, personnel changes, changes in FTEs. Are you reducing personnel, increasing personnel, and if so, in which categories?
So we are not increasing personnel. We do have some shifting in personnel in terms of redeployment, and that is how we're funding the 0.5 director of ELA, 0.5 director of mathematics, and the 0.3 director of SEL across our 3 districts. So we're not being impacted in terms of the staffing levels. And if you look at from 21 to FY22, you'll see a decrease of 9 employees in the FTE chart.
Yeah, so if I could continue?
Yes, Tony, go ahead.
Thanks. So is this shifting internally, does this mean you have fewer teachers next year?
No, so we are looking at some of our existing positions. You know, for example, we have instructional technology specialists, so we're redeploying. We're looking at some of our coaching curriculum specialists and kind of redeploying and rethinking about how we're using people. But it's not reducing the teachers in our classrooms in front of kids.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing nothing else, I guess I'll leave it up with John now. If we're done with the K through 8 to move on to the regional high school.
Actually, before we, if I may, Mr. Chairman, before we move on to the regional, I'm just wondering, Greg, can you maybe just spend a moment on page 56 is your capital plan, and just spend a moment just kind of touching base on the capital requests, because a financial planning committee meeting took place last night, and so they reviewed these requests, and you and I have had some conversations about the nature of the projects that are included there. I don't know, you've got some
Sure.
updated information with regard to the some of the grants that you're able to use for some furniture replacement and so forth.
Just give me 1 second to get there.
Yeah, it's 50. There you go.
All right, so yes, so again, typically, through John's leadership, we have a meeting early in October around, what are the capital projects that we're hoping to accomplish in the upcoming year. We have many examples over the years. This past fiscal year budget, we were able to seal coat Melican, and also create some handicap accessible ramps in front of Melican and in the rear of Melican, and also repair some of the walkway behind Melican. This year, the thinking of the district was really to purchase some snow removal equipment, but again, and also do some smaller repairs, tile replacement at Peasley, replace some science tables and carpet, and then some student desk and teacher chair replacement. None of the projects that we have on our capital plan, facilities plan, really meet the threshold of the town's capital amount.
In fiscal 22.
In fiscal 22, yes. So we had some conversations with John, and John basically said, in your budget, why don't you create some space for this to happen? So we are looking at, in terms of the student desk and teacher chair replacement, we were able to fund that through some of the grant money that we received for reopening and the stimulus funding. So that has been accomplished because, again, we needed to purchase additional desks to increase in-person learning for our students. The projects that we're looking in FY22 to move forward, or the purchases, is snow removal equipment. And again, that is basically kind of ongoing purchases to kind of maintain the snow equipment fleet that we have. So we had brought this forth. It didn't meet the threshold, but after conversations last night with the financial committee on a presentation from Keith Lavoie, I think the goal is to add some money to the budget to fund these purchases, and actually to create a consistent line item on a year-to-year basis to purchase some of these things on these items that don't meet the capital plan threshold town level.
So just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, and again, these were conversations that took place last night with the financial planning committee. So what the committee has a very strict policy of capital items or capital projects. You want to stop sharing the screen, Greg, if you don't mind? I'm a visual person. If I can't see anybody, I feel like I'm talking to myself. So the committee had a very significant discussion last night. And again, how we've gotten to the fiscal stability and our financial condition being as solid as it is for the town is because we move forward on very defined and agreed upon principles. One of which is that we don't bundle small things like furniture or tile replacement or carpet together. It doesn't qualify to be a capital project. Under our policy, a capital project has to be $25,000 or more, have a useful life of 5 years or more, and really be appropriate for funding with debt. In this instance, you wouldn't issue debt for furniture or for carpet because it's really just not appropriate. But the committee has worked over the years with the various departments. I'll pick on the fire department. They used to come in every year for small pieces of equipment and hose and things of that nature, which didn't meet the threshold for a capital project. And so the idea was within each budget, there should be really a dedicated line for these smaller pieces of equipment. And if you had a small amount of money that you then could plan over the next 5 years for how you would rotate and purchase some desks, purchase some carpet replacement, some microscopes, whatever it is, or snow blower equipment, whatever it is that you need. So I know this is sort of a bizarre thing, and we've had probably the only community in the Commonwealth where the town administrator is having this conversation with a school committee member, telling them that they might want to increase their budget by a little bit. But really, this is about a principled approach and a partnership. One of the things that we never do is you can't ask a department to fix or solve a need out of thin air, is really what it comes down to. So if we're telling you these projects don't qualify for the capital budget, they need to fit in the operating budget, but yet we're asking you to come in last year at a 1% and this year below a 3%, because we're trying to manage the tax impact. That doesn't change the fact that you still need snow blower equipment, and you're not going to take it away from instructional teachers to get it. So we share equipment, and I just want people to know right now the DPW and the schools share significant amounts of equipment and help. But the idea is, the recommendation, this again, it's going to sound very unique here, but the recommendation would be for the K-8 school committee and the superintendent to put $30,000 into your operating budget beyond what you've approved. But the agreement would be that it has to stay in a dedicated area to take care of small equipment needs. That it's easy when things get tight and you want to spend it on free kindergarten or a teaching position or something else like that. The commitment and the ask of the financial planning committee would be that it remain in a line item and used for those things, so that the commitment would be that we don't want to see really any of those things come forward and have to say no, because we've given kind of an out for that. So, I mean, that's something I'd like to work with the superintendent on, but what it would allow him and the administration to do is to, if that's in the part of your base budget, over the next 5 years, how are you going to rotate? How are you going to take care of the tile replacements? How are you going to do some carpet replacements, some furniture that you need, and move forward on that basis? And again, we try never to say, look, no, things have to find a home, and this small equipment is something that is needed. It needs to find a home, and it shouldn't take away from the instructional, the student instructional services that are provided. So we believe that would be a reasonable compromise, and I can't imagine anybody here is going to say, no, we can't use any additional money in the operating budget. But the commitment would be that would be dedicated for these small equipment things moving forward. And then when you look at our capital plan and you look at the requests that are being made by the school department, it's for a roof, I believe, on the Z school. Next year, we need to talk about how we're going to get that done. And then you've got some larger building projects that we'd like to focus on. We really don't want to spend time talking about things that arguably belong in the operating budget. So those are the conversations that have been taking place. That's the conversation we had last night. I've had some preliminary discussions with the superintendent. We did want to see where did things shake out with the federal funds, where's the overall budget, and is this something that we feel comfortable putting into the increase for the fiscal 2022 budget. So,
Yes, Tony.
So with this shift or shift from the capital budget to the operating budget, you were coming in at a 2.47% before. As I look at the numbers, that doesn't seem to go up very much. What do you have a figure as to how much that?
Well, a $25,000 increase would bring it to 2.57. And again, if you had that and it's consistent over the years, again, you can cycle through these smaller equipment needs without drawing away from other things. So again, a 2.7% increase is still, in my opinion, reasonable. Everything that we add to the budget. We know, in our case in Northborough, because we've been so careful with the way we budget, we have levy capacity, but it's about managing the tax impact. I don't know if you read the paper today, but Worcester County, single family home values are through the roof. And the home values are what's going to drive people's increase in their tax bills. It's not because the school budget's out of control or the general government budget is going up a lot. It's because their asset upon which the tax is based is growing disproportionately. So, but at the end of the day, people don't really care why their taxes are going up. They just know that they are. They don't care what the rate is. They don't care what their values are. They just care how much their tax bill is going up. So that's something we're very sensitive to. But again, working within the parameters of the increases that we discussed during the financial trend monitoring of what's a reasonable increase, I think the superintendent has brought forward a budget, particularly for the K-8, that is, level service. I know my budget target is 3% or below, again, to maintain our current level of services. To go much below that, we're cutting services, and I don't know that that's what this community is looking for. They're looking for us basically to work together collaboratively to bring something that's reasonable, that's sustainable, that everybody can support. And we've had, I'll knock on wood here, we've had 12 consecutive years of unanimous support from all the boards and committees for all of our budgets and our capital, because frankly, the superintendent, we don't play any games. He knows everything I know what he knows, and we don't come in, the school committee doesn't come in and say we need 12%, but we'll sell for 8, knowing that we're going to have to get down below 3. So, given that we don't spin our wheels on that sort of a game, I just think it would be a reasonable increase, and I know the Financial Planning Committee would support it. I would hope that the Appropriations Committee would support it, kind of springing it on them in real time tonight, but I think it's something we should talk about, and the school committee should think about modifying the budget up a little bit to take care of these needs.
Thank you.
Through the
Rick,
chair.
you've got a couple of folks with their hands up. I think Joan Frank has her hand up.
Yeah, my screen just blanked for a minute for some reason.
That's because I told you to increase the budget. That's what I knew that was going to happen.
It's was it Joan? Yes, Joan.
Through the chair, Keith LaBelle, to either John or to Greg. We took the vote of our budget at the February K-8 meeting, a budget of 2.47. I know in previous years, it's always been said that when we take that vote, what was hammered into me way back then was that we could take that vote, we could lower the budget, but we couldn't raise the budget. I don't know if that was a true fact or not, so I just need clarification. We took the vote, can we raise?
You can't raise it at town meeting, but before we go to town meeting, it can be modified. It would require a vote of the committee.
Okay, so that's where the clarification comes. We can, at town meeting, you cannot raise the budget.
Right.
But could you lower it at town meeting if somebody made a motion?
Yes, you can cut budgets at town meeting.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And-
Tony, that goes back to you or my time.
John, could I just make a general comment through the chair?
Yes.
So just I just want to be clear to the committee that this is very recent developments as of last evening, and conversations that we've had today. Have not had a chance to process this with the school committee. So we will have future conversations around what does this mean, and how do we move forward to make this change in our voted budget. And again, I'll have conversations with Chair Keith LaBelle and find the mechanism to move this forward.
Yeah. Again, we're trying to find something that's reasonable so that you don't keep coming to us asking for things that don't qualify under the policy and we say no. That's not fruitful. We need to find a solution to these things.
Do I have any other comments from the committee?
Rick, do you see Lauren's hand up?
Yes, I do. Yes, she's on the end. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I just wanted to thank both John and Greg for your continued partnership with the school committee. And John, I do appreciate the conversation about finding solutions for our small capital improvement projects. I'm just curious, I guess, a resident. For the capital improvement projects, I know you were mentioning some parameters, like that projects have to be, I think, did you say greater than $20,000?
A capital project is defined as a physical, basically a physical asset of about $25,000 or more with a useful life of 5 years or more. And generally, it would be something that would be appropriate for financing with debt or a bond. In Northborough, just to clarify, in Northborough, we have very, very few projects. I mean, that's the definition that we're currently operating under to give us some reasonable flexibility. But in practice, we generally don't, most capital projects are, 100,000 or more, unless we're looking at pickup trucks or equipment that's, 50 or 60,000. Very rarely, if there's something in the capital budget for 25,000, usually it's a match to a grant like the generator at the last town meeting. So it's a 25% match for a $100,000, generator. But yeah, that's the floor. Small things, anything below that, we expect the departments to carry that in their operating budgets. Because that's not what the purpose of a capital improvement plan is, not for snow blowers or, small things.
Perfect. Thank you. That clarifies. I guess I
Sure.
was wondering, over the years, have those parameters changed within the town, or have they remained pretty consistent?
No, I've been the town administrator for 12 years, and I put this capital budget, and all the boards and committees voted on the accepting of the town's comprehensive policies, and that floor has been 25,000. It's sort of it's a very I'd say kind of an industry standard that's the minimum, the floor. Some towns will raise that up and say 50 or 100,000. The idea is we're lucky in Northborough in that because of the way we've managed ourselves, we've been able to pay cash for most of our equipment. We paid cash for the Proctor School roof. So that very few towns can do that, but it's because of the way we use our one-time revenues. And so some towns will make that threshold much higher, but 25,000 is really the lowest that you'll see anywhere in terms of, like, if the state has a program says you're going to put a capital plan together, 25,000 is the absolute minimum for a capital project. So anything lower than that is considered an operating expense.
Thank you so much for the clarification.
Sure.
Do I have any other questions or comments?
Right.
Seeing none, we'll turn it over to John to move on to our next for the regional high school budget.
Yeah, actually, I don't have much for a setup here that I haven't already said, so I'll turn it over to the superintendent. I know, and he'll go through his presentation.
So thank you, John. So just hot off the press, the regional school committee meeting was held last evening, and I did present the recommended superintendent's budget to the committee, and the committee did vote the budget last evening. So this is hot off the press. I will not repeat the vision and mission, as we are, 10 schools, 3 districts, 1 community of learners. So we do share mission, vision, and a strategic plan across all of our 3 school systems. The budget process I will not review as well. It parallels the Northborough pre-K through 8 budget process. And however, I will revisit where we left off in terms of the fiscal year 2021 budget process. And again, I'll refer you to the last 2 rows. The intent was to bring to the voters a budget increase of 3.31%. However, as a result of the pandemic, we did have to go back to our budgets and reduce it as a result of the context of the pandemic, and we move forward a 1.50% increase over fiscal year 20, which reflected a $356,632 increase at the regional level. And again, how did we do that? We saw reductions in FTEs. We had 3.9 reductions. We deferred, which is not a good practice to get into. However, it was a very difficult and challenging budget times. We deferred technology purchases, classroom textbooks and materials, general supplies, and library materials. And then that is how we came to the 1.50% budget. So in terms of budget priorities, much like pre-K through 8, the Regional School Committee did spend a lot of time this year with the new strategic plan, thinking about its budget priorities for fiscal year 22. And a little bit different than Northborough, but on the same theme in alignment with the strategic plan goals. Prioritizing social, emotional, physical well-being of students, maintaining high quality staff, instructional programming, striving to achieve class size, preparing students for high levels of success in college and career, funding initiatives in the school improvement plan and Vision 2026. Also, a budget priority was to create and fund a short and long-term capital plan for the high school. And lastly, fund approved initiatives that were recommended for the Coalition of Equity. In terms of the budget variables, much like the pre-K through 8 budget, we had contractual obligations, custodians, and Chapter 70 funding and new legislation. So again, Chapter 70 funding and the Student Opportunity Act really seeing what the governor's budget, House 1 budget would signal in terms of funding the Student Opportunity Act. Also, the regional high school or regional school district is dependent on circuit breaker as well as regional transportation reimbursement. So again, those numbers tend to be variable and unknown. As we move through the budget process, we have a better understanding of those numbers today as a result of the governor's budget. And again, similar to Northborough, really thinking about, what are the COVID-19 expenses that we can anticipate that will continue in the fall as a result of the pandemic. And lastly, just working between the two towns' economic landscapes, the town of Southborough and the town of Northborough, and working in partnership with, again, John Kader, and in Southborough, Mark Purple. So in terms of the budget drivers at the regional level, technology, and again, looking at purchasing some of those deferred purchases that we reduced the budget in FY21. We also saw a significant increase in our Worcester Regional Retirement System assessment. We saw a 17 to 20% increase in our assessment, which is a significant amount. And then insurances, health, liability, and workers' comp, we saw an increase of a little over $146,000. And again, this is also where we partner with the town of Northborough in terms of really trying to negotiate the best insurance rates for our regional employees in the regional school district. And that has been another partnership that has yielded great results for the regional district. Special education tuition out of district. So we had a couple of students who required out of district placements and residential settings, which again were significant in cost. So that totaled $389,400. And I would say this is the greatest budget driver in this FY22 budget that we're seeing. And then COLA's line item increases totaled a little under $200,000. So the overall sum of the budget drivers is $844,623. In terms of fiscal year 22 offsets, we had circuit breaker reimbursements of $560,000. We had retirements and educator leave of absences, a little over $280,000. Reserve and revolving account funds. As a result of the pandemic in the spring, we were able to save on transportation, which we were able to put in a transportation revolving account. So we're applying that in fiscal year 22. And then again, similar to Northborough pre-K through 8, looking at line item reductions, again, working with the leadership team at Algonquin, the department chairs and educators, looking at, what are those line item reductions. So that total a little over $190,000. And lastly, applying grant funds, ESSER and IDEA, a little over $77,000. So our budget offsets were a little over 1.2 million for FY22. So again, the FY22 recommended budget reflects a level services budget with growth in some targeted areas. The overall budget is $24,976,703, which is a recommended budget increase of $844,623, which reflects a 3.50% increase. And again, if you look at the 3.31% budget the school committee voted, was hoping to bring to the town meeting this past spring, this budget reflects a 1.69% increase. So again, in terms of the overall budget process, this table reflects the process from initial budget requests in October all the way through what I am presenting this evening. And again, similar to the Northborough pre-K through 8, the exercise really is what if there were no fiscal constraints that we had to consider, what would principals and department chairs ask for? And then we start from there and start really thinking about what we need, what we want to accomplish in terms of the school committee's priorities, as well as thinking about what our goals are in terms of the strategic plan. So in terms of growth areas in this budget, we have some purchases in instructional resources and professional learning. Similar to pre-K through 8, the high school also has a new history and social science framework and learning outcomes for students. So it's making some purchases to make sure teachers have the correct resources that are aligned to the content standards. Translation services pre-K through 12, again, we're seeing a much more diverse family population. They're culturally diverse and linguistically diverse, and as a result, we're increasing our translation and interpretation services. And again, the shared position across our 3 school systems, pre-K through 8 Northborough, pre-K through 8 Southborough, and the region, we are funding a 0.3 director of social and emotional learning who will be shared across the 3 districts. And again, that person's responsibilities will be to look at the social emotional learning programming and curriculum across our 10 schools, making sure that educators have professional development in these areas, and making sure there's coherent programming pre-K through 12. And similarly to our pre-K through 8 Northborough presentation, we're instituting the software to really manage our absences and substitutes. And again, this piece of software is shared across our 3 school districts. In the Northborough Southborough portion of that is a 30% of $10,000, which is the overall cost. So in terms of the statutory assessment, quickly, again, taking the total budget, and again, these are some of the numbers that we became more clear with the governor's House Fund budget. We have our projected Chapter 78, which was a little over 3.2 million. We have our projected regional transportation aid, which is a little over $700,000. We have revenues. So that total is $3,930,473. And that is subtracted from the total budget. And after that, our total is $21,046,230. And again, each community is given a minimum local contribution that is required to spend for education. When we subtract Northborough's minimum local contribution and Southborough's, we get the total required contributions that are apportioned via the regional agreement, which is by enrollment. So Northborough portion of the is 60 of enrollment is 63.64%. So the apportionment for Northborough is a little over 4.9 million. In Southborough, it's a little over 2.8 million. Adding in the minimum local contribution brings Northborough's total portion of $13,323,067, and then Southborough's $7,723,163. So the regional school districts are allowed to have excess and deficiency account, which is 5% of the overall budget. And that money, that account is for the single purpose of reducing towns' assessments. Again, as a result of the closure in the spring, we saw significant savings in our budget because we weren't operating at full capacity. As a result, we were able to fund our E&D at a little over 4.5% of the 5% of allowable amount. The regional school committee had many conversations around whether to apply E&D to reduce assessments to our two communities. And after much conversation and also looking at the school committee's E&D policy, which is to stay within a range of 3.25 and 3 3/4, a decision was made to apply $500,000 to reduce the town's assessments. So again, apportioned by the regional agreement and enrollment, Northborough's portion is $318,200, and then Southborough's is $181,800, which reduces the assessments to Northborough to $13,004,867, and Southborough $7,541,363. So for Northborough's difference from FY21, it's a $417,692 increase, which reflects a 3.32% increase over fiscal year 21. And Southborough's reflects a 2.51% increase over its FY21 amount. So this is a chart with a lot of data, but again, I will highlight.
Greg, can I just interrupt you for 1 minute?
Sure.
So can you just go back? So this slide here, is that page 19 in the presentation?
I believe so, John.
I think the one, I think the budget that you sent over, I'm glad to see that slide come up because I got a little bit concerned. But the slide that's in the written materials has us at a 5.85% increase.
Correct.
It doesn't include the E&D. I just don't know if that slide needs to be updated.
It does, John. So when I sent over the budget book,
Yep.
that was with the latest budget revision we had, and because we had a meeting last evening.
So this was the vote from last evening.
This is the vote from last evening.
My apologies. So yeah,
Okay.
that's much. I like these numbers much better. So I'll just be quiet now.
So, so the budget that you have, John, is without E&D applied.
Right.
So the vote last night was to apply the $500,000.
Thank you for that clarification. I just didn't want anybody looking at their budget book afterwards thinking that the numbers weren't matching up.
So again, I think just looking historically, if you look at the fiscal year column, and then the third from the last column, E&D applied. So historically, E&D has been used to reduce the town's assessments of the regional budget, with the exception of fiscal year 20. And again, last year we were able to apply $300,000, and this year, again, through I think good fiscal management, we're able to fund our E&D account, and that allows the regional school committee to make decisions around if the assessments are negatively impacting our communities, we can try to reduce those assessments through applying the excess and deficiency funds. So I will stop at that point, and before we continue in the budget booklet, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Tony.
Thanks. I was following along with the materials that we received. And so I was reading about the 5.85% increase. And I saw there were lower numbers, but I didn't quite get what those were. Could you maybe put that slide back up again?
Sure.
What is the actual proposed
Yeah, and
increase?
if following the meeting, Greg, if you can just email that slide out and I'll get it to the committee so they can have it.
Absolutely. Of course, I was too quick to close the presentation.
Okay. So it's 3.32 and 2.51.
Correct.
Yes, good, thank you.
Do we
So
have any other questions or comments?
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, I just want to thank the school committee on the use of the E&D. It's an appropriate use, and it certainly is something that we, based on our January 14th meeting, we were carrying a 5% increase and concerned that it might go higher. I was just hoping, so anyway, thank you for that. I think that brings our increase to something that's manageable and reasonable and sustainable for the community. I'm just wondering, Greg, if you could just take a moment and speak to the enrollment, the growing enrollment and the shift, because that was been our concern for us for the last couple of years, that despite the fact that your budget increases are reasonable, the shift from in terms of the number of students means that Northborough is responsible for a larger portion of the budget. And that's why we have been seeing some more significant assessment increases. So I appreciate the mitigation of that, but just curious where we are in that shift. And I believe we had discussed that the shift would be ending or leveling out in 2023. Is that still the case?
That is accurate. So just quickly, so as John indicated, what this table here includes is the enrollment percentages by community, Northborough and Southborough. And as you can see in fiscal year 11, Northborough's enrollment represented 58.68%, and Southborough's reflected 41.32%. As you look to fiscal year 22, Northborough has a greater portion of the enrollment at Algonquin. As a result, has a greater apportionment of the assessment, which impacts its overall increase. As you can see over the years, the past 2 years, we've seen a significant shift. And as we look ahead outward in fiscal year 23 and through 27, we see it balancing again, similar to what we experienced in fiscal years FY11 and FY12 and FY13. So we are seeing enrollment shifts back to a more balanced approach in the outward years.
So we're hopeful that in the coming years, that when it comes to our assessment, we'll see more reasonable. Not that this isn't reasonable, but we will see a less of an impact and a more balanced increase in the assessment reflected through in the budget reflected through those assessments moving forward. It just, again, this is the type of information that we need to share and we build into our forecasting models, because if our enrollment's going up and our share of the high school budget's going to go up through our assessment, we need to model that, because that clearly is going to have an impact on the tax impact. So it's important for us to be clear about what's happening with the enrollment and how that flows through the formula for our assessment.
All right, do we have any other, Tony?
Well, thank you. So going back to the budget, if I got these figures correctly, then the overall budget increase is $845,000. But am I correct in understanding that $473,000 of that, or more than half, was for special education out of district placements. The question I have on that is that an unbalanced cost, or was there how much was some of it offset by circuit breaker funds or something?
Yeah, so oftentimes the out-of-district placements and whether circuit breaker is triggered in a time that it impacts a budget doesn't always align up. So these are positions that were unanticipated, and we do not anticipate to receive circuit breaker funding for those out-of-district placements for next year. But in FY23, we should see funding for those placements. So there's a gap, and that is reflected in this budget.
Well, it's kind of a one-time expense then, or at least some portion of it is.
Correct.
Thank you.
Becky, did you want to comment?
No, I was just going to mention that these were two, like Greg said, these were two placements that we had not anticipated that came to us, I think, right as we started this process. And because we use our circuit breaker in such a way, our funding that we receive for FY22 is less than what we would normally be expending for our out of district. So, we should see a catch up in, like Greg said, in future years. So as these students continue through their schooling, we will be receiving reimbursement for those services.
Okay, do I have any other comments or questions? Yes, Joan.
Rick Neighbor, as chairman of the Northborough Southborough Regional School Committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present our budget here tonight. And I'd like to thank the administration for the hard work that they have started along with the faculty back in October, beginning this budget and now getting to this point. I'd like to thank John for all his and Jason for all of your cooperation. You have made this such an easy process, and one missed a Saturday all days, but this was a good process. And I'd like to thank you for the cooperation. We've all been working together. And I think it goes back to all the meetings that Greg and Becky have been doing since then and providing us with the numbers, and along with Christine Tagg, who has worked the numbers and the assessments and telling us that we're within the realm of what we should have in our E&D account and how much we can spend in that. And I think educating all the 10 members of the Northborough Southborough Regional School Committee, and like to also thank Chris Covino, who's one of our newest members and is working his hardest on this and learning the process as we go forward. So thank you to everybody in attendance. And also I can see 2 Northborough members still there. Thank you very much for all your support. You made a great evening. Thank you.
I think I could speak for the committee. I'd like to thank that Greg and Becky for their presentations, which were concise yet very thorough and informative. Do I have anything else before we move on?
George had his hand up. I'm not sure if he's still.
Let it go. I'm okay.
John, could I just make 2 comments, 2 other points? The first one is around OPEB. And again, that last year the regional school district was able to create and fund an OPEB line item in its budget. The FY22 budget that you see this evening does not have any money allocated to that line item. However, I just want to point out that it is something that we're working toward in terms of coming up with a sustainable vehicle to fund OPEB, similar to what the town of Northborough has done. But again, I just want to point out that that is an unfunded liability, and we're looking at ways and mechanisms to fund it in future years. Last night at the regional school committee meeting, we did have a discussion of different mechanisms to fund it. And we're hopefully putting together a 5 to 10 year plan for OPEB. But I think it's important for it to be mentioned because it is an unfunded liability that the regional school district is responsible for. The other topic I briefly would like to speak to is the capital plan for Algonquin Regional High School. Algonquin Regional High School is a beautiful facility, well-maintained. It looks brand new if you walk through the facility, but it is not, it is aging, and it is not getting any younger from year to year. The school committee did set a budget priority to fund a plan for capital expenditures in the outward years. In 2017, I believe the town of Northborough did authorize the regional school district to create a capital revolving account, which is a legal account which we can actually fund for capital projects up to 5% of the budget, similar to E&D. That did not move through the Southborough community. Our goal is to get approval from the Southborough town voters in the next year or two, and actually start creating a capitalization stabilization fund. Because there are projects and repairs that need to be funded that are significant. And the last thing that we want to do is have all of those projects and repairs come all at once and hit and impact the communities of Northborough and Southborough. So those are two areas I just wanted to point out, that we are looking at creating plans and trying to fund those so we can, again, lessen the impact to potentially the overall Northborough town budget.
If through the chair, if I can comment, look, you know, I'm a big fan of data, measuring, and planning. You know, large capital items don't sneak up on you. A roof does not sneak up on you. You know as it's depreciating, deteriorating. So planning, and even if you can't fully fund it or fund it as you would like, it's important to know if you're deferring something, exactly what you're deferring and what that means for future costs. So, you know, there's value in the planning itself, and sometimes you have a plan and you have to wait for the finances or the opportunities to catch up to that funding. So, but it's good to have a handle on that and to be thinking about it always. The other piece of it is the planning allows you to smooth out the impacts. You know, just like with our capital plan for the town, you know, we don't want to come forward with 3 large building projects within 3 years, because obviously it's going to have a significant spike in the tax impact. So I appreciate that. I think it'll benefit everybody.
Do I have any other comments or questions?
Before we slide off, if we're going to wrap up with this, Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention, you heard tonight, there are several critical pieces of financing that benefits the school department and the high school in particular. Special education circuit breaker, regional transportation under the governor's budget. There's a reduction in regional transportation. We've already reached out to our legislative delegation and said that we need you to help us out and advocate for those funding line items. On March 8th, our legislative delegation will be coming into the selectmen's meeting. We have provided them, working with the superintendent and the administration, the school administration. We've given them a comprehensive list of our priorities. And so I'm hopeful we'll have the superintendent there at the meeting, or somebody from the schools, to speak and emphasize what's contained in the letter regarding those particular items, but specifically the circuit breaker funding and the regional transportation. They need to hear it directly from you, what the impacts are. So I invite everybody to come. You should have received a copy of the letter. If you haven't, I'll send another one off to the superintendent to forward to you so you can see what's contained in it. Again, it's designed to allow us as a town and a community to speak with one voice towards a legislative delegation and tell them these are the things that are most important to us, and this is the priority in order in which we would like you to emphasize them. And we've had great success over the last couple of years of gaining their complete support, and they have actually followed through. And after the governor's budget has gone through and the legislature, the House and the Senate does their work, we've seen those numbers increase. And so it does have an impact, and it's important that they know exactly where we stand and what we're asking of them and how we would like them to vote. So that will take place on March 8th, and you're all invited to watch that meeting. Thank you.
You need a vote from our board at this time to support your increase of the suggested increase of the school budget, another $25,000-$30,000.
I think at this point, Mr. Chairman, what makes sense is for the school committee to have that discussion and the superintendent and I to have that discussion. And ultimately, we're working through in real time, kind of where we are on the various budgets and capital items. What'll happen is at your meeting where you go through the warrant, at that point, you will take your formal vote to recommend approval. And at that point, if that budget is modified, that would be the appropriate time. There's no action required by the committee this evening. These meetings leading up to your vote are informational. It's a chance to ask questions, ask for information, ask follow-up. So unless there's more information you need on that, there's no action this evening.
Does anyone else have, from anyone, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to our next agenda, which is the draft of our town meeting warrant. And at this time, I'd thank the school committee and the superintendent and the finance director and everyone for, again, their concise, informative, and very well done presentations, questions, and comments. And at this time, I'd release you for any other duties here. And I hope you stay on for and listen to our rest of our meeting. But at this time, you can go and relax. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. And I will be watching it on YouTube.
All right, I'll turn it over to John and we'll proceed with our town meeting draft of the warrant articles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just very briefly, we have compiled the list of warrant articles to date from the various departments and boards and committees. So the idea is just to let you see what the list is. It's pretty straightforward. There's about 41 articles, so very fairly manageable warrant at this point. Typical budget warrants, budget articles. There's the capital budget articles that are in there. There's several community preservation articles, which will come to you in a separate presentation. And then there is, I believe there's about 9 or 10 zoning articles that are being proposed by the planning board. So there isn't really anything extraordinary. Even the capital projects you'll see are mostly equipment replacements. So no major building projects coming forward. The process moving forward in terms of the warrant would be the Board of Selectmen will vote at their next meeting, will complete the warrant. They'll vote at their next meeting to close it. Town council will then review and finalize it, and then we'll move forward with posting. But again, sometimes we have warrants that can be 60, 70 articles long. So right now, it's primarily the typical articles that we would see every year: budget, capital, CPC, zoning. I certainly can answer any questions that anybody may have about at least the placeholders that are on there.
We have no proposed special warrant articles from the public on this one this year.
There are, as of right now, there are no citizen petitions.
It's Janice.
Is the fire station on the warrant this year? The new fire?
No, so the fire station project, right now where we stand on that is we have entered into a purchase and sale for the property. Under that purchase and sale, this is the 6165 West Main Street property, the old Pierce gas station across from Dunkin' Donuts. So we've had a purchase and sale. The structure of that purchase and sale is that the seller has to remove all of the buildings and structures and handle any remediation that's found. Remember, this is a former gas station. And so there's very good language in the purchase and sale. And during that removal, they did find some compromised soils that are being removed. We anticipate that should be wrapped up sometime by the end of March. And at that point, remember, we've already have an appropriation from town meeting to hire the owner's project manager and the architect and to move forward with the design. So once that property, we're clear that it's going to be cleaned up and it's acceptable and the town will purchase it for the agreed upon price, the committee will begin meeting spring through the summer, fall. That project will come forward for town meeting next year in a ballot vote for a debt exclusion. So I'll just say we had very good language in the purchase and sale. That's, yes.
Do I have any other from Tony or Bob or, yeah, George?
Nope.
All right, moving on then. We have a review of the town's legislative priorities letter.
Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this evening. I know you've received this via email. A lot of the priorities are similar, but the real thing is just to remind you that, as I said earlier, March 8th, our delegation will be coming in. We'll be going through this letter with them. The two top priorities for the town are our Chapter 90 funding, which takes care of our sidewalks, our roadways, culverts. That funding needs to be increased by the state. That's the #1 top priority for the town. The second is making sure that the state revenue sharing is in place and state aid accounts are being funded at the levels they should be. Things like unrestricted general government aid, like the lottery funds, special education circuit breaker, regional transportation. Those are things that we want to emphasize are critical for us. Those are big ticket items for the school department, and they're off budget. So when you look at what the schools get for Chapter 70 funding and our state aid and through the regular budget process, these, you heard it tonight, the superintendent talking about, and Tony kind of honed right in on it, the significant special education costs. Well, if that circuit breaker funding, which is an off-budget funding source, if that wasn't coming from the state independently to offset those costs, you would see significantly higher increases in our operating budgets. Same thing with regional transportation. If the state isn't providing and funding regional transportation at the level they're legally supposed to, well, all that happens is whatever that shortfall is, it gets divvied up between Northborough and Southborough, and it shows up in our assessment. So these things are critical off-budget funding sources that we don't want to lose sight of as a community, and we want to emphasize those to our legislative delegation. So beyond that, there's several other smaller items in there, but I'm not going to read the letter to you. We've discussed it at length at the selectmen's meeting, and we're going to go through it again on March 8th. But I do encourage you to watch that and to just, the point of this is of many of these exercises that we do, starting with the financial trend monitoring, these budget meetings, the legislative delegation priority process. It's all designed to make sure that you as a board or committee member understands the large picture, how everything fits together, and to stay on point for what's most important. It's easy when you meet with legislators to get sidetracked about some little piece of legislation that, yeah, it's nice, but it's not critical to the operations of the town of Northborough. So everything is designed to get us focused on the things that are most important to us, so that the limited time, the limited face time that we have is spent on the things that are critical and most important to us. So, but all of this stuff is designed to just make sure that you as board and committee members have that big picture, and you're comfortable with where we're going. What is the financial condition of the town? What are the things that are in motion? Are they moving in a positive or negative direction? And is there anything from a policy standpoint that we should be doing to impact the direction in which things are going? So it's always an open, ongoing dialogue. The key is information and process. That's what I think we excel at in Northborough. And that's why these meetings that used to take 9 hours on a Saturday with people yelling and pointing fingers and storming out of the room. When was the last time you saw something like that in Northborough? It's been over a decade. Good information, good process, and good culture. People wanting to work and collaborate and get to something that's positive. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I think it's a great credit to our town administrator and our school superintendent on how well this meeting went tonight and how we actually finished it up in a normal meeting time. These meetings are going faster and faster. I miss those Saturday meetings. We'll have to have breakfast next time instead of lunch.
You just missed the free lunch, Rick, I know.
All right, the next thing on our schedule is just go over our next meeting date will be March 4th. And for anyone at home, that we will be discussing the Aspet Regional Technical High School's budget, the police department budget, and the fire department budget. Now I'll open it up for any other business or comments or questions from anyone. Jason, we haven't heard a word from you, or
I did indicate I was present at the beginning of the meeting, so.
You could hear one word.
Jason is just trying to keep a handle around all these insane federal grants, and the rules are constantly changing. And with the administration change at the federal level, it's a part-time job just to try to keep a handle on those funds and to track them to make sure that we get full reimbursement through either the CARES Act or the FEMA reimbursement. It's not easy. So been keeping them busy.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the comment, Mr. Chairman, that, pursuant to John's comments, I am spending a lot of time working on these federal grants, but it is good news that we are getting these grants. And we're in the same boat as everybody. Everybody's trying to figure out these regulations. Every community is trying to do the same thing that we're doing with maximizing our grants and figuring out these regulations and complying with them. So I would just end my comments there.
do you have any other comments, questions, anything from the committee or the staff?
Nope, just as we move through, you see your agenda, you see the departments that are coming. If there's any additional information that you would like from any of the departments or any other departments you'd like to hear from, let us know so that we can set that up because we are on a fairly tight schedule. I did want to mention, and I was going to mention something when we were talking about the warrant. So right now we're staying on track, budget process on track for town meeting. In all likelihood, we're not going to have town meeting on April 26th in the auditorium, given the fact that we're just not going to be there with the vaccination. So more than likely, we're looking at another outdoor town meeting, and we are sort of targeting the first or second Saturday in May. So the 26th is the last week in April. So that Saturday town meeting, or potentially the Saturday after. But the idea is to stay on track and not to let this drag out. There's really no reason for it. So we want to stay on that. At the next March 8th meeting, we'll have the moderator in to speak to the board about perhaps choosing a date and a time and a venue for town meeting. So that's coming up, but it will not more than likely be on the 26th at night in the auditorium, given the pandemic still. So put a save the date in your calendar.
Yes, Janice.
John, in reference to having any other people come to see us in the meeting, will we see the planner as planner and not as just a representative of community preservation?
Normally Kathy Drubit would come in. If you would like to specifically have her come in, we generally do a quick kind of economic development update. Kathy and John Campbell will come in. Is that what you're interested in receiving?
I'm interested in hearing current projects, finished projects, and upcoming from the planner.
Okay, I will book her in on that day when CPC comes in. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
No further comments. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Janice has made a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second? Tony has seconded the motion. Well, I'll take a roll call. All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting? Tony,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Janice,
Aye.
myself, aye. It is now 7:51, and I will adjourn the meeting of the Appropriations Committee this evening.